Hello and welcome to Rainbow History Class, the queer and trans history that you probably don't get in school. My name is Rudy Jean Rigg.
And my name is Hannah McElhinney and we're back
again. It's been a while. I feel like I have lived an entire life since I was on the road to coming here before I got a migraine attack. So.
Yep. That was, you might have noticed that last week we didn't have an episode for you. That was as a result of Rudy's brain mechanics.
Yeah, but we did leave you a little mysterious message. So if you caught our mini class announcement episode that went up, you're one of the special ones. What can I say? But we're back here again. And this week, Hannah, I'm taking you through the second half of Aleister Crowley's life. So are you ready?
I'm so really excited for this because I was on the edge of my seat and then I had to wait 2 weeks to hear what you were going to say next. So if you haven't listened to part 1, I really recommend you do because this guy is completely batshit.
He's bonkers. Like just a little recap to dip your toes in the water of part 1. This guy came straight out of the gate. It was like the second he was born, he was into it. And what is that he's into? Well, it's occultism, all right? I mean, could it be anything else? No. So straight out the gate, occultism, lots of sex ritual magic, loved an odd job or two, and he loved to travel and he loves to desecrate people's graves. And that's kind of where we left part 1.
Absolutely. And like, is he an all-round good guy? Absolutely not. Do I want to know more? Yes.
Yes. And that is where I come in handy because we are now looking at his life from 1914 onwards. So obviously he desecrated or rather fixed the grave of someone else who we've spoken about on the show before. And after he did that, he basically found himself in the throes of the First World War, as everyone did, I imagine.
I think that was like a broadly relatable experience to the whole world at that time.
Yes.
Except for Switzerland. I hear they were neutral.
I heard that too. Well, look, Aleister found himself in America in the year of 1914 and he was home. Well, he lived in America until 1919. So he spent most of the war like in America and it was a neutral country at the time that he was there and he began working for a pro-German newspaper called The Fatherland. And this particular newspaper held anti-British sentiment, which was interesting because obviously Crowley is British. And you know, this paper was sort of dedicated to keeping the US in a neutral state during the conflict. So big ask from a single paper to be able to provide like the propaganda required to pull that off. But
the little community paper that could.
Yeah. Well, I wonder if it did. I didn't look into the paper itself, but it seemed to be quite popular. At least Aleister Crowley kind of brought it a bit of a reputation, but never mind. While he was writing for this paper though, he still was kind of into his occultist stuff. He was still into trying to contact different deities, contact different sort of like people from other realms and things like that.
He had some side hustles.
He had side hustles, and that's like really the key takeaway from this guy's life is he had a lot of side hustles. But in 1917, he did a set of rituals, and through these rituals, he believed that he was contacted by a preternatural. I don't even know what that word means. Did I write this like half asleep? I'm just going to Google
Preternatural?
Preternatural. That's just beyond what's normal and natural. So like, I'm going to say alien because that's what this guy looked like. This entity that Aleister Crowley came in contact with looks like an alien. Like if you Google Aleister Crowley Lamb, so Lam, what comes up is an illustrated version of this entity, which Aleister Crowley.
Did he illustrate it though?
Yeah. And okay, it just looks like a grey alien.
Hang on. Good God.
Right? Like,
you know, kind of looks like one of those. Do you remember Mad Magazine?
Yes.
Now that was a magazine that was loved enough to stop a war.
Was it?
No.
Oh my God.
But I
like,
liked it. It looks like one of the back covers of Mad Magazine.
Yeah, kind of does. Like, yeah, definitely check out this illustration. We'll put it up on the socials, but it
Also,
is
it'd be
something
kind
else.
of funny though, like if maybe what hasn't been discussed as to whether or not this like being was actually just like a really normal person and Aleister Crowley couldn't draw very well.
I think there's two. That is the third option that I didn't consider, but I have considered two other options. Number one, he was so high on some kind of drug that he just like kind of had some sort of DMT trip where he just saw this alien looking thing.
I mean, I feel like that's basically what happened.
Yeah. But then my other option is like, now that we know that aliens actually do exist, I'm like, did he actually encounter an alien?
No, you know, I just think of like all of these, like before we had cameras and could take actual pictures, I think a lot of supernatural encounters can be chalked up to a lack of artistic skills on behalf of the sighter.
Perhaps, yeah. And racism. So
Exactly.
it is always racism.
Did we just solve the supernatural?
I think we did.
Bad drawing and racism.
Exactly. That's all it is. Yeah. So this is sort of just another like anecdotal story of the fact that while he was in America, it's not as if he left his occultist sort of ritualistic life behind. It was still very much part of him. It's around this time that people started to believe that he had been recruited into a British intelligence agency. And now
Please finish the sentence.
And now looking back on that, it's even more likely that that was true.
Okay. Can you set the scene of how well known this guy was? Because it's very probably rare to me that as part of the general public, I've had kind of suspicions about non-famous people. That guy there, he feels like he has been recruited to a secret intelligence service. Like, where was he sitting in the fabric of society at this time that people started speculating?
Well, okay. It's kind of hard because like a lot of this is sort of retrospective, like, yes, like we totally knew like where his kind of position was in society. That's just, and so we can't really apply that to exactly what it was at the time. What I can say from what I understand about this guy's life is that he had definitely a higher than normal level of like social notoriety than like say like just your random like liberal arts student. But
okay.
Like he was like, there was conjecture that he was like involved with like and knew Winston Churchill and was kind of, particularly during wartime, like, you know, whether he was saying it himself and it was just a lie or whether it was true, I don't know. But
so he was kind of like a deep state figure, kind of one of those people that has all of these like connections to powerful people and was kind of either lying about these connections or retrospectively they were all lying about not knowing him.
Yeah, and it's hard because it's like, I guess you could put it in this framing to understand how popular he was. Like he was not a celebrity or a public figure, right? So in terms of like the history books remembering him, he kind of does fall through the cracks. But in terms of thinking about like notable like aristocratic style figures who did have some kind of impact on politics and culture, he definitely kind of belongs in that space. Like,
yeah.
So you can kind of see why he doesn't get taught about in schools because he had no actual like impact on like large world events, but like in his own circles, he was very influential.
It's kind of feeling like Jeffrey Epstein or like, you know, the Arnie Hammer family.
Yeah,
kind of really, really powerful people.
Don't really have like a public face.
Yeah, don't have a public face, but are very behind the scenes and can control a lot.
Yeah.
And also like sort of sadists and terrible people. Yeah. That kind of reminds me of that. But I also think like, you know, in that First World War time, like there was such a wealth and class divide around education that there weren't that many people that were considered educating. So the elite class, I think from what I gleaned from research, it was kind of, you know, something that was a real kind of hodgepodge of people with different education. And if you were educated, then you could maybe access those circles a little more easily than you would today.
It is, yeah. I wish we had like more like videos and stuff of him. I don't know. Like, I just kind of want to experience him on a level that's not just like his freaky little diary that he like released. Do you know what I mean? I want to see him from the outside. Like, I'm sick of kind of being in his brain.
I feel like that's so true as well, because I think so much of the historical sources that we have are people's diaries, and people put the craziest shit in their diary, which is what it's for. And then on the outside, they're probably normal. If you like read my diary and then had no idea about me, but from my diary,
you're a completely different person.
Yeah, well, people would think I'm weird because
hang on. They don't already?
Are you saying that, oh my gosh, I'm perceived? I'm perceived. You don't need my diary. No, but I guess like my journaling practice would be, it's like a brain dump at the end of the day of all the thoughts that are in my head. That I just want to get out before I go to sleep. So often it'll be things like my foot's sore or like I'm hungry or I ate
Jessica's a fugly bitch.
Yeah, or blah, I hate blah, blah. Like, it's really like unnecessarily like angry, random stuff that I want to get out of my head. So if you then found that as an artifact, you would be like, who is this person who seems like constantly enraged, hungry with random ailments?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I know, like, God, could you imagine reading anyone who went through an emo or scene phase, they're going to look back on that and think, what the fuck was happening to these children? And I would say, yeah, what the fuck was happening to these children?
It is true, as well as like when I'm writing my journal, it's not for anyone to read, so I'm not trying to be particularly erudite. So sometimes I will write as a grown-ass adult, blah, blah was mean to me today, because that's shorthand. But you wouldn't want to take it out of context and be like, who is this adult that is writing about her interactions like she's in preschool?
Yeah, it's oh God, I'm so glad I don't have any sort of like footprint of my journal. I do, but it's like I will never look at them again.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Burn them. But justice for Aleister Crowley's inner world.
Yeah, I have a level of respect of someone who is going to publish their diary, but then I also go, you could have really taken the time to
edit it.
Anyway, speaking of private documents, a historian in the last 10 years actually kind of looked into Crowley to sort of figure out whether these British intelligence claims were true. And what he found was really interesting. In his research, he found a long-forgotten World War I era file of the US Army's Military Intelligence Division that was sort of lost in the kind of the cascade
of time.
The sands of time, the cascades of time. And when he was looking through this file, what stood out to him was that from whatever was in this document, that they could conclude that Crowley was an employee of the British government on official business of which the British consul, New York City, had full cognizance of, and that the British government was fully aware of the fact that Crowley was connected with German propaganda and had received money for writing anti-British articles. So
he was kind of a double agent.
He was a double agent in that, like, he was telling the truth, like, because he was saying, like, oh, I'm a spy. Like, he kind of was, like, being a bit coy about it. Now, the whole receiving money for writing anti-British articles could be that paper that he worked for.
Yeah, I'm sitting there going, like, receiving money for writing anti-British articles. That's, like, a job that he had at a magazine that was, or a newspaper that was anti-British.
Yes.
So that seems like it would check out.
Yes, but what's interesting is that the British government knew that he was working at this paper and was getting paid to write anti-British things, but then he was also an employee of the British government. So that part, that he was an employee of the British government, is to say that he was a spy, because
so it's like he was
doing?
A double agent, or he was pro-British, infiltrating the anti-British newspaper for secrets and staying under the radar with his anti-British propaganda.
Yes.
Okay.
Like, it's just a bit hard to understand, like, what exactly it was, because this file, it didn't really have much information. It kind of just had some leads. It was not full of
deciduous trees.
Deciduous trees. I was going to say perennial, but that's the opposite. Now, when this researcher reached out to official agencies to ask them to comment on it, MI16 or so MI16?
MI6?
MI6, sorry.
What M16?
M16. That's the latest Intel chip you can add to your computer. MI6 rather, they refused to confirm or deny that they had any info about Aleister Crowley on file, though they did conjure up a list of press references that somewhat might logically infer can be sort of like considered a file of, Aleister Crowley. So they had these like, I guess, references that were put in the press that they had kind of almost clipped and made a file up. So like in that sense, they kind of had a file. They kind of knew what this guy had done during the war, but they weren't willing to confirm or deny it. So it was kind of a bit weird. They kind of just, I don't know what pretense they slipped this file on the table and said,
I feel like MI6 probably has files on all manner of people.
Probably. Comparatively, MI5 at first denied knowing anything about Aleister Crowley, but when they were confronted with the undeniable fact that there were records stored in other places about him, they acknowledged that they had made an error in saying that they didn't know anything, but then admitted, and then was like, oh, actually, oh, it was so stupid. Sorry. It's like Sunday morning. I just totally forgot that we had files on this guy. We had files on him, but they got destroyed a long time ago, we think. Was the official thing.
That is so funny because I think that the silliest lie that you can ever tell is making a mistake when saying you don't know anything about something and you actually do. Like,
yeah,
that is just not.
It's not a mistake.
A mistake.
Like the only time you could say that's a mistake, and this is, I guess, where it becomes like plausible deniability in that, like, they could have been like, oh, we sent Jim out to do that job and Jim actually doesn't know anything. So you can understand why Jim said no. Like, you can understand why Jim had no idea about this. But if you spoke to Michael would have been able to tell you 100% that we knew. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, they could have said something like that. So this guy has gone from being someone who was just having sex in the desert and calling it magical to like being some kind of figure within the spiderweb of the war.
I really do feel like this guy had similarities to Jeffrey Epstein.
That's okay.
In a sense of he was obviously terrible, but also had these connections with influential political figures and was clearly moving in these circles. But when asked about it, all of those people are just like, yeah, nah, didn't know him.
No.
And then, so he's not necessarily like a celebrity or an actual politician or anyone with actual power in terms of official power, but an influential kind of figure who knows how to use his resources and privilege to kind of twist the arms of people that do have power. That's kind of how I'm seeing him.
Yeah. Well, you're right. And I think what's really funny is like this guy loves to toot his own horn. And he went around sort of saying that he was talking to Winston Churchill and that he was kind of in cahoots with all of these big politicians. And not only that, but he also wanted to say that he had been the creator of the V for victory or peace sign that Winston Churchill used. I know. This guy just doesn't give up.
It's reminding me of Jojo Siwa.
What?
In a sense.
Oh.
Sees someone doing a peace sign. I did that. No one has ever made a sign to represent peace like this.
It's really funny.
It's scary. Someone's got to do it. That was me. Yeah. 2 fingers.
Yeah. So he said that the V for victory sign, and this is where I'm like, it's so murky, babe. Like, stop taking the drugs. You can't remember anything straight anymore. Like, I don't know whether he saw Winston Churchill do it and then the lie that he came up with, I'm calling it a lie because like I just don't think it's true, is that he then contacted Winston Churchill. And this is where I'm like, it gets a bit murky. One option is that he saw Winston Churchill do the V for Victory sign. He then got on the phone and said, you know what, mate, I can supercharge this thing with magic and it'll become like a symbol, and it is part of the divine like system in my, you know, religious theology. And therefore, if you do this sign and if you make it part of your like campaign, you will win the war. And I'm like cooking, I'm not exactly saying it verbatim what he said because like there is no real records, but like that was one of the options that were kind of put down. The other option was that he sort of in his rituals came across this symbol and then got in contact with Winston Churchill and then like, urged him to do it.
Dude, I've got something for you.
Yeah. But either way, he claims to have pointed out the importance and the levity that this symbol could have and was instrumental in making sure that it was used. And so in that way, he has claimed ownership almost over the use, particularly of it during that time.
I guess it makes sense. I mean, you know what? Queer people are very good at coming up with symbols. We invented the high five.
Yeah.
You know, symbols are our bag. And so I can totally see why he came across this symbol and saw the power of it using. That's very like politically smart.
Yeah.
You know, we've seen these symbols kind of represent ideologies for centuries. I mean, whether or not he came across it when he was kind of in a theological state of ecstatic, I don't know. But he probably just saw the letter V.
Yeah, I mean, I still do feel like sometimes when I think and look at the things that he did, like, for example, this, I'm like, are you still trying to one-up William Yeats because he didn't let you into his boys' club? Like, it just to me kind of gives me that vibes. Anyway, I don't want to spend too much time talking about his politics, but as you said earlier in the episode, Hannah, he wasn't a very good person in terms of like things that he did. Like, obviously he's engaged in a lot of like non-consensual acts, and I think his politics of the time was really representative of like, yes, he was quite like progressive and liberal, but in other ways he was very conservative. And some people have said that he sort of lent into the sort of Nazism space, particularly during World War II, and
profoundly racist. And he, you know, exploited Indigenous cultures for his own game. And while he was sexually progressive in terms of he was pro-sex, it certainly, I get the point that it was not about decriminalizing sex or, you know, making it accessible or gender parity or anything like that. It seems just like he wanted to have a lot of it.
Yeah. And like there are sort of notes and people do obviously like say that he was potentially anti-Semitic as well. Because like, just for example, if you want to get an idea of like where this guy's politics kind of does lean, Marco Passi wrote that Crowley wonders whether it would not be better to directly exterminate the Christians whom he calls the parasites of man, and also the Jews who fundamentally belong to the same religious stock. So this guy has some very severe views on things, and it's not very hard. It doesn't take very long to like see the sexism, racism, misogyny, like anti stuff.
The kind of pagan occultism side did lead to Nazism in the sense of things like master races, anti-Christianity.
Yeah.
I think something that's really interesting is where we've grown up in terms of, I guess, becoming socially aware as, you know, white Australians. You get a sense of the church being the Christian church being the conservative aggressor, because it has been an oppressor for so much of history, and a lot of the homophobia and transphobia that we're faced with is coming from that Christian religious place. However, I feel like sometimes you can kind of sit in this binary, polarized culture and forget that there are a lot of people that also hated the church, but also held horrible opinions about different minority groups. And so we can't just this or that. That's what led to Nazism, was like a pagan, a revived sense of, pagan gods and spirituality, which comes from this occultist lineage. And then that same lineage is also in support of a lot of modern occultist practices and beliefs, which are like resoundingly inclusive and positive and community-led for people like us. So basically, everything's very complicated.
It is. But thankfully by 1920, the war had ended. So everything went to being really simple, Yes. And he was like, woof, job's done. No longer need to be a spy. I can head back home to London. Wrong. He got called scum when he got back to London.
Well, it was probably all of that anti-British propaganda he was writing.
Yeah. So he thought, we're better to move than to Italy. He moved to Italy and he thought, lovely Mediterranean diet. It's a blue zone. I'm definitely going to get the most out of my life now. I can
And
leave.
then the growing fascism, also attractive.
Yeah, also attractive, really suits his personal politics. So he's really thinking, this is where I'd love to start a family. Well, a second family after I dogged the first one. But so he decided to make his own chosen family unit, and he
that's nice.
it is nice. He decided to make a commune for his followers because he had, after the war, got again back into his main side hustle, occultism, and he was still developing his own religion, Thelema. And he'd pick that back up, obviously, because in the other episode, in the first part of his life, he had a tumultuous relationship with developing his own theology, and he decided to park it for a while.
Do you think anyone is still developing their own theologies? Like, I think that so many times through history, there's always people having a crack at being a preacher or like a spiritual leader. Everybody's just like, you know what? I'm going to have a go at this. And I feel like the closest person in the culture today that believes themselves the leader of spirituality or kind of a church in this same way is Andrew Tate.
I think there's a lot of people like that because, I think of Andrew Tate, Donald Trump, that woman who turned blue, I don't know. I feel like there are a lot of modern cults. I think we just don't really see them a lot in Australia because they're not really baked into our culture. Religion's not baked in the same way. But in America, they have a huge, they've had a huge issue with cults for over 100 years now. And so I think in that way, it's there are probably hundreds of people across the globe who
could be seen as a modern preacher.
Yeah, but I think mega churches are a really good example of people who would feel like they can move people in the same way as Aleister Crowley could move people with his sex magic.
But they're still pulling from an existing religion. I'm thinking, who's making a new one?
Oh, well, that's the thing. I think when you look at neo religions, fortunately, unfortunately, I suppose, quite a few of them have come from science fiction, 20th century science fiction.
Yeah.
And so in that way, it technically is a pre-existing religion because it's a pre-existing text. And it's people just giving a life to a text that was never actually meant to be a religion.
Yeah.
But I don't know. It's really interesting. I would like to learn more about that.
Yeah.
But Crowley finds himself in Italy. He's got a huge estate. Lol jokes. It's not a huge estate. It's a tiny house. It's a 2-bedroom.
Okay.
He loved to call it an estate though. So maybe it was an estate. I don't know, but it was this literally, it's a shack. If you, again, we'll put this on socials, this, just look at it, please. Can you look at this out? Just go Abbey of Thelema because that's what he called it.
Abbey of Thelema. And he called it an estate.
Yeah. My notes here.
It's a 2-bedroom.
Yeah.
Yeah. So obviously nothing that anyone could afford today with that cost of living, but by today's standards, this would be an estate. But that is so funny that he's just I don't know, he's just resoundingly optimistic. He's looked at this small shack and has gone,
he's
my estate.
He's a car salesman. He's turning back the speedometer. Anyway.
Can't you sell good cars, Dad? Do people need good cars?
Literally.
I think I said that last episode.
Yeah. If only his child had survived past being a baby, she would have been able to say that to him.
Yes. Where is Mara Wilson to star in the Crowley biopic?
I don't know. So he began this estate, but this commune, all startup business owners know that the first 3 years of business are the hardest, and he was really feeling the pinch. And so by 1922, he was like, fuck, I need money. I'm like a really avid drug user. That's where all my money's going. This commune has a bunch of people. Like, I need to be able to support, like, in part, the commune. So he went back to London, having thought that he would
Is this the first time he's thought that he might need to provide for a family?
Well, perhaps.
That's nice.
That's me being optimistic about maybe his secret agenda of just getting more drug money. But, he went back to London, and he found himself writing again because he just can't keep his mouth shut. And he published a few articles in the English Review that were actually criticizing the Dangerous Drugs Act of 1920.
Oh my God, I really wish Crowley had a Twitter account.
Oh, he would have just popped off. But it was really interesting because the Dangerous Drugs Act of 1920 was an act that the British Parliament wanted to enact, which said that drug addictions and substance abuse would be seen as a felony rather than a medical condition. So they wanted to criminalize people who struggled with using substances. And so he then, off the back of these articles and this act in Parliament, wrote the novel The Diary of a Drug Fiend, where he kind of put pen to paper his experiences as someone who was an avid drug user. So this was, again, one of these little tidbits that kind of were happening, as a B plot to the kind of A plot of his life at the time. And now we hit the point in the story where we find out why he was dubbed the wickedest man alive.
Wow.
So he has gone back to the Abbey. He's finished writing about drugs and he's returned to Italy. Now, at this commune, a young Thelemite by the name of Raoul Loveday moved to the Abbey with his wife, Betty May. So lovely names, just firstly, can I say?
Well, can I just say, because I've just found another picture of the Abbey of Thelema, and I'm not sure if this is the same place that J.K. Rowling lives.
Do you think there's mold on the walls?
But there's black mold everywhere.
Oh my God.
Look at this.
I mean, that's a current day picture.
Yeah.
The mold. Oh God, that's terrible.
But like mold is not going to have been any better 100 years ago.
Well, I would say the mold is better today just on how mold works based on science. But if you want to base it on pseudoscience.
And I do want to base it on pseudoscience. And what I want to do is say that Crowley
was mold affected.
Was mold affected.
From the day he was born.
And you know, he's probably licking the walls because he was probably like, this stuff could do something to my brain chemistry. So he was like gagging, licking, spitting, getting up in the walls.
So are you saying that he was basically a precursor to the discovery of penicillin?
Pretty much.
Okay. All right. We've got that on record. So Raoul Loveday and his wife, Betty May, lovely named people, moved to the commune, and this is where things become quite contentious and a little bit true crimey.
Ooh.
So Loveday was devoted to Crowley. So Raoul was dedicated to Crowley as a leader, and May detested this part of his life at the commune. She really hated that, her husband was sort of like ogling over this other guy. Whether it was romantic or not, I don't know, but like he was just like completely obsessed.
Why'd she join his cult then?
Well, probably because she would have either been like called a spinster and left to like die on the streets, and she thought, well, this may be a two better, but like at least it's a roof. This is where she started to absolutely spit facts about Crowley. Okay. She said that Raoul was made to drink the blood of a sacrificed cat.
Okay.
And that they were required to, and this is a trigger warning, so if you don't want to hear anything nasty, skip ahead 30 seconds, cut themselves with razors every time they used the pronoun I.
Like, is that to, I guess strip away the self and the identity? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it's to like decentralize like the idea of being one, and like the idea of being individual, and like to kind of bring together. So we're looking really at like, we've moved sort of, yes, it's still in the occultist space in that like, yes, there was sort of like this kind of magical theology as the backbone and that sort of like religious stuff going on there. But like it was well and truly at this point in time what we would probably consider a cult, just a plain cult, because of these sort of like despicable acts that like Crowley was.
Self-flagellation.
Yeah.
And like, removal of like the identity. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a strong through line with cults.
Yeah. So this is what Betty said was happening. And now what happened after this was that Raoul Loveday, her husband, then drank from a local polluted stream, developed a liver infection, and then died in February 1923.
Aw.
So this spurred May to return to London and share her story with the press, which is where we get these anecdotal stories of the cats and the razor blades and things like that. It was off the back of this story that she'd put to the press that John Bull proclaimed that Crowley was the wickedest man alive and a man that we'd like to hang. So now this guy is calling for his death in London.
Okay, I really don't think forcing somebody to drink the blood of a cat is like the worst thing that he did.
Oh, definitely not. But when it comes to like the polite nature of the British, I can see
That's
why
pretty
it crossed a
bad.
line. Now, Crowley deemed many of these accusations against him to be slanderous, but unfortunately he was just not in a financial position to afford the legal fees to sue John Bull.
I'm sorry. That is the funniest thing. Like, it's kind of saying him coming out and being like, yeah, they are slanderous and I would sue. I'm just not in a position to do so.
Yeah.
But yeah, let it be known that, I would win. I just can't compete.
No, exactly. It's like, oh, sorry, my ankle's a bit sore, but I could do it if it wasn't.
I could win if only. Yeah.
Now, as a result of this, John Bull was like, I got to take this dog down. He got to go down. And he published these stories in newspapers throughout Europe and North America. And so kind of in this sense became a bit of a viral moment, a bit of like a, if Crowley had good PR, he could make a bit of a career off the back of it. But he didn't, as we know, didn't have any money. Now, this is where the fascist government of Italy came to be aware of these acts that had apparently occurred in their country. And Benito Mussolini personally learned about Crowley's activities. And then in April of 1923, Aleister Crowley was given a deportation notice from Benito Mussolini, forcing him to leave Italy. And without him in Italy, his abbey had to close. So
even though I feel like, Mussolini and Crowley probably had a lot in common. Maybe Mussolini just didn't want his grass cut.
Listen, I'm not sure. I don't know whether he saw Crowley as a threat. I think he just saw Crowley as like antithetical to the fascist government that they were trying to because essentially Crowley was trying to in a way, a lot of his politics though kind of had the smokes and mirrors of free will, not free will, but one true will and being opposed to large authority groups. And so I guess Mussolini was like, you got to go.
You've got to go. Yeah, absolutely. You cannot
sashay away.
Your way up in here. Got it.
So now we fast forward to 1940s because between the period of 1923 and the early 1940s, this guy lost everything. He really, I think, ran his opportunities into the ground.
So he didn't return to his espionage life of World War I. He didn't want to reprise that role in World War II.
I think he disgraced himself too much. I think, I think the cats, as we said, was the last line for the British public, in terms of even being some kind of double agent. He had no money. He ran out of his inheritance a long time ago. He'd obviously been turned away from his mountaineering community. As we know, terrible tragic accident happened
when
in Nepal.
When your mountaineering community turns away from you.
Who do you have?
Yeah, who do you have?
And so we now find ourselves during the days of his, the final part of his life. And he actually spent his last days and a lot of, I guess, that very last period of his life in a boarding house. He stayed in room 13, which is an unlucky number. And he basically drank and did so much drugs that that was really ultimately what led to his death. While he was dying though, I suppose he developed his own tarot deck and he wrote a couple more pieces of writing during this time. They weren't as
productive until the end.
I know, he literally can't give it up. Really, I'm sensing a workaholic situation here. He really needed to get some kind of recreational activity that didn't cost people their lives. Just saying.
Don't we all?
He died in Hastings, England, but Hastings Borough Council actually prohibited his cremation, and they were like, we don't want to like basically associate with this guy. Like we don't own him. Like he's not our monkeys, not our circus, not our monkeys, like whatever. And so there was like kind of this issue of like he had died there in those days. Like you weren't really carting corpses across the countryside to a different place. So there was a bit of like a council issue. I can imagine. I hope, in my mind, they kind of had like a Parks and Rec.
him, yeah.
Yeah, I get like, can you just imagine that council meeting where they had to sit down and go like, do we allow this guy to be buried? And they had to go through all like the pros and cons of his life. Like,
yeah, do we want to claim him? And I also just feel like, that's such a, he was ultimately cancelled, which, deservedly so. But it seems like people aligned with him at different points in his life when it made sense for them to do so. And now at the end, they're like, oh no.
Listen, if there was any truth through the magic that he was doing, would you want that cursed corpse in your cemetery with your grandmother? Just saying.
Absolutely no. And that's totally fair.
Yeah. I know you have a penchant for last words. So I have just found his last words. Nothing again is for sure, because it's like I don't really think the death nurse or whoever was there, or like I can't even say that there was anyone there when he died. Like that sort of like blow by blow of events of like his actual death is not really recorded, like to my knowledge. But the main thing that's quoted when it comes to his death quote is this: "I am perplexed. Satan, get out."
I feel like this is my morning words. I wake up perplexed. Satan, get out.
Yeah. I haven't had my coffee yet.
Yes, but first coffee, then Satan.
Yeah, I mean that's
Satan, get out. It's kind of It's kind of like when your pet wakes you up in the morning.
Satan, get out.
Yeah, it was Satan, his cat.
Maybe, I don't know, but I mean, I really hope that's what he actually said, but we can't prove it, unfortunately. But for someone who had such a large life, he kind of did drop the ball in the end, gotta say. Like I really
just didn't have the endurance.
No, he didn't have the endurance. He burnt bright and fast.
He did.
But yeah, so he unfortunately did succumb to, I guess, the addiction that he was struggling with, but also he had no money. So, and also he was a shit person. So I don't know. There's a lot of things going into it. But there you go. That is the incredible life of Aleister Crowley, the wickedest man alive.
Wow. I mean, what a full life.
I just don't even know what to comment on in retrospect after telling that story. Like there's so much that happened in that first half in part one. And I feel like there was quite a dramatic turn in this episode with the espionage, allegedly.
It's just interesting because before social media, there were few people whose story was told and followed. And so I think that by way of somebody's story being made public or people being aware of someone already went a long way into mythologizing them.
Yes.
So back then you'd have these people that people would watch like reality TV today. And so you're just like, what a full life. But when we think about it, many of us have full lives.
Yeah.
And if they were told blow by blow in the same way, maybe we're all an Aleister Crowley, minus the ritual sex magic and cat blood drinking.
Well, like,
but hey, I don't want to yuck anyone's yum. But
please don't drink the blood of cats. Please don't drink any blood.
Just consent's important, and Crowley needed to know that.
Yeah.
And that way, if you are going to lead a mountaineering expedition, you really need to look out for your people.
Yeah. Oy. I mean, he's really lived in my mind for like since I first started researching this like over a month ago now. Like this guy, I'm glad to have him out of my mind now. Like I feel like I can move on. But I feel like he's
exorcised his ghost.
Yeah, I feel like, and this is the thing. What I found interesting was like when I looked into him, my first thought was like, oh, watch like a video essay or something online on YouTube, and there was just none. Like that kind of went through his entire life that didn't dramatize it or like tabloid it, you know what I mean? And so obviously this is going on YouTube. So I kind of like, I'm quite proud of like us being able to like add that in, because I think he is really interesting, and it is a shame that this hasn't sort of been collated. So
It's true.
Yeah, kind of, it feels nice to maybe.
We've added to the canon of deeply problematic daddies.
Yeah, occultist
of
daddies.
history. But thank you. Thank you.
No, you're welcome. This has been my first frontier. The next frontier I will address is gay frogs, but that needs me to learn basic chemical comprehension. So
cool. Good to know.
Yeah, just wait for that. I'll be giving you some homework so you can figure it out yourself.
Well, if you want to continue learning more, please check us out on socials and on our Discord, which I have now joined.
You are in there now. Please go out and check our Discord. We love chatting to people in there. You can also join our Patreon for free. I know when people say Patreon, it's often like, oh my God, I'm going to have to give money. No, you don't.
Although you can.
You can. We're not going to stop you from doing that. But if you want to join our Patreon, you can access our free tier, which gives some of the exclusive access to the paid tier plus some free bits and pieces. Patreon is also kind of the place where we will be doing like exclusive access to pre-sale and things like that with tickets and, you know, merch and stuff in the future. So yeah, head on over there. But apart from that, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching.
And like I always end an episode, because as you said, I do love last words. So my last words are, not everything is gay, but there is gay in everything, including a black mold ridden cute 2-bedroom on the Mediterranean coast.